Welcome back. Ed Molesky here, and I'm now joined by the CEO and president of Geomega Resources, ticker symbol GMA, Kirill Muggerman.
Hi Ed, how's it going?
Kirill, great to have you on the show. I got to confess, I don't know much about rare earths, and I don't know much about magnets. Okay, and I know, and a lot of times when I see the word resources, I think of a junior exploration company.
Correct.
We're not talking about that here.
No, not really.
This sounds like there's some technology, some serious technology.
So Geomega Resources definitely is not a traditional exploration company. We used to be back in 10 years ago. We discovered a large rare earth project, carbonatite in Quebec. But since 2014, Geomega has really been focusing on how to refine rare earth elements. And so I've been running the company since 2015, and we've been trying to develop this technology that not only will take change the way we process rare earths, but we actually want to bring production into Canada. So what we've done, if you look at rare earths from that point of view, the main rare earths objective is those magnets that I brought here to show you today.
They're very hard to pull apart.
Yeah, they're very dangerous the bigger they are.
They are, eh? Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
they can snap your fingers together.
Really? So you want to produce some rare earths?
Correct.
And you, just so I understand this, and it's the process by which you're producing them that's interesting, or?
The process is very interesting, and it's as well the source. So instead of having to develop our own mine, our objective was, what we're going to do is we are going to focus on secondary sources. So rare earth elements are industrial minerals, right? Somebody buys them, makes a product out of them. What's the main product? Magnets. So I said, okay, well, if we have a magnet as a product, it doesn't come in that shape. Somebody had to make it. So when they make that magnet in this shape, you have so much waste that gets produced. Then that magnet goes into a wind turbine. This big broken magnet here is from a wind turbine. But when they disassemble a wind turbine, guess what happens? Well, that magnet has to be picked up, processed by somebody. Otherwise, it gets recycled as just a regular steel. And that's not much. That's 10, 20 cents a pound. But then when you actually recycle it for the rare earth content in them,
yes,
then the market becomes very interesting.
This is expensive stuff, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So rare earths are, neodymium is around $45, $50 a kilo, depending when. Dysprosium, $200, $300. Terbium is in $400, $500 a kilo. So it's expensive material.
When somebody says rare earths, there's only so many of them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a finite amount based on the periodic table, correct?
Correct. So if you look at the periodic table, you got two lines at the bottom.
Yeah.
The upper one of those two is the lanthanides. But really, it's a zoom box of one square on the periodic table. So that zoom box shows you the 15, and they're almost identical chemically. So you want to try and separate them? Good luck. It's not easy.
And you told me you're only going to try and produce 4.
Correct. So the magnet is made from iron, a bit of cobalt, boron, a little bit as well, and then 4 rare earth elements: neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium. So 4 elements.
Can you spell all those?
Yes, but don't ask me to spell it.
No. Yeah. Okay. So now you were an analyst before, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So I think I read that. So how long were you an analyst for?
3 years, 2011 to 2014. So.
And you were following this company?
My focus was rare earth elements in general. So yes, I followed this company. The brokerage firm where I was working did the IPO to take Geomega public. So I'm very well familiar with the story. I knew the shareholders behind it. So it was a very interesting story, great project. And then they came up with the idea for technology. And that's really what, in my opinion, differentiated Geomega at the time from everybody else.
Do you have a scientific background?
I studied geology.
Okay.
With a very strong scientific background and not only exploration.
Right.
I started doing research into rare earth elements from a scientific point of view in 2007.
Okay, so today, you just told me you raised some money. Mm-hmm. So your treasury is looking pretty decent.
You're pretty good, yes. So we raised money with a very specific focus on building the first rare earth processing and recycling facility in Canada. It will be the first really real facility outside of China like this, because outside of China nobody recycles rares. So we actually want to recycle those rares, use the technology to demonstrate that our technology works, generate cash flows. And for that we need $2 million. So we raised $1.2 million. Plus we are working right now on the debt financing with government and other institutions. So that should be that's
Okay.
very soon. And then the next thing you'll see is we are selecting as well the location where we are going to build the facility. So that's in the Montreal region, on the South Shore most likely. And it's not a big facility. You don't need a lot of place to recycle rare earths, because I mean we are looking at processing 1.5 tons per day.
Right.
Which is not that much. But in terms of rare earth production of just those 4 elements, that's a lot. So we expect to generate around $10 million in sales per year when we start operating this facility.
You expect to generate an annual revenue of about 10 million?
Correct, yes.
And is it fair to say what do you expect your EBITDA to be, or what do you think you need? Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
What do you think you need to break even?
235 tons per year.
And what does that mean in dollars? Is that like...
So in terms of production quantity...
at $10 million of revenue, is that 235?
No. That's 500. So basically,
okay, so even
our
if
break-even point is roughly, let's say, 235. Once we process 235, we are good for the year, and then everything else is basically revenue. So at 1.5 tons per day, which is 500 tons per year, you get roughly $10 million in sales. Contributing margin, we published the numbers, it's approximately 24%.
Sure.
Very, very solid numbers.
and so tell me, right now you have about 100 million shares?
100 million shares, correct, 99.
And you just raised, what price did you do the financing at?
14 cents.
And did you include a warrant with that?
There was half a warrant at 20 cents for 2 years.
Right. Yeah, so I've got the chart of the company up for the last couple of years. There we go. It's on the screen, I think, behind you.
Yep.
So I'll just make a couple of comments here, but you know, this looks like you've made some progress here.
Yep.
And you joined when?
I took over as president CEO in 2015.
And you were director of the company before that?
No, business development.
Okay. So you've been, okay, so yeah, if we just look at this, so you obviously based, you know, and you had a now what was that? What's the reason for that move? I mean, there's something happened there.
Yeah, so an interesting connection was we have a spin-out that we created a couple of years ago, Kintovar, which I presented here once in the studio.
Okay.
Actually twice. So Kintovar had a very large discovery, share price movement.
And what did it?
That's in copper.
In
so
copper.
It's a copper exploration company.
Yeah.
And because Geomega owned at the time 25% of Kintovar, there was a lot of interest of people buying Geomega shares because of the shares that they owned in Kintovar. So that created this spike.
Yeah.
That you mentioned there.
And I'm just looking at this now, and yeah, so it looks like, you know, we've had a good run here. You've raised some money at 14 cents, and here the stock is, it looks like 17, 18 cents, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, well, you got to feel like you've made some progress.
Absolutely.
It's been a tough market. You know.
As tough as they get.
It's tough as they get. Yeah, resource, I usually a general term, but resource stocks relative to everything else have never been cheaper.
Yes.
And you know, in this sort of domain that we're involved in, you know, junior exploration. I particularly like copper going forward, but I know with all that. So, what's your take on this trade stuff? With you must be following this very, very carefully.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, trade wars are.
Nobody wins, really, do they?
Nobody wins, but funny enough, rare earths, they're so politicized. Back the big run of 2010 to 2012.
Right, I remember.
it was pure politics, right? I mean, you had one country blocking the sales of rare earths to another country, the market panicking, everybody starts looking for rare earths. It was just the perfect storm, right? But it was pure geopolitical tension that triggered this. Today, the demand is much more real, in my opinion, than it was back in 2011 when I was an analyst. Today, the demand, look, you have electric vehicles, which are, I mean, every day we see more and more.
That's going to it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen. It's going to happen faster and faster.
In my opinion, there's no way we are going back to the days where we don't have any electric vehicles, right? So I think we can all agree on that.
Sure.
It's just a question of how many years it will take to get to full penetration. But then as well, we have wind turbines. Remember I mentioned this is from a wind turbine? 3 megawatts wind turbine is 2 tons of magnet inside. And you don't put one wind turbine for 3 megawatts. You put many of them. You have the entire wind farm. So how much magnet goes into all this? It's a lot. It's a huge amount. Yeah. Per year, global production is 160,000 tons of magnet. That's a lot of magnet every year.
So in your macro view, being a former analyst and you have a degree in geology or studied do you see shortages in some of these commodities developing, like copper? Like, I mean, there seems to be a lot of copper around, and yet they say there's, the grades now are not that the low-hanging fruit's getting picked, isn't it?
So let's say I don't follow I know some of the macros better than others. For copper, for sure, big underinvestment.
Right.
Rare earths is pure geopolitical, and the U.S. just doesn't have any. I mean, you have one mine that keeps going bankrupt every 10 years, basically. It's privately owned right now, and maybe it will go into production in full scale and will be producing for the US, but it doesn't look like the US government is too convinced of that, because they are collecting information. Who else can provide them the same services? In Europe, there's no real rare earth production. It's all in China.
Yeah. So now you've got this money, and you're going to go into production, but I'm just looking at this saying, this looks like it's going to cost a lot of money to do this. Is it a big capital expenditure?
The $2 million that we are putting together, so 1.2 from equity, plus
some debt,
a portion in debt, we are looking at $2 million total to put the whole thing into production. It's a base model of 500 tons per year. That's enough for us to demonstrate, because until now it's a black box, right? I mean, how does it work?
But that's not the end. That's not the end game. The end game is to show you've got a process, to show you can do it, and then partner up with some big money, or
correct. So partner up with large and larger suppliers of this.
Right.
So there is end of life, and then there is primary. So waste. So primary waste is every single time you make a magnet, you make 15 to 30% waste. 15 to 30% waste is a lot, considering that you produce per year 160,000 tons.
Yeah.
So where does that all go? In China, I know that they recycle it, but outside of China, they struggle to recycle it properly. So the big model here behind this is, once it's working at the base level of 1.5 tons per day, then drive it towards 6 tons and maybe even higher. Where is it? It's in Asia. It's in Europe.
Sure.
You can go to so many countries and you'll find factories that produce magnets. That's where your material is. You just start processing it because there is a lot of material that's not being processed right now. So
one final question before we. So you're getting people paying attention here, that they're following you. They call you up and they're interested, and because technology plays. Not many great technology stories. I don't, be careful how I say it, but we're not known as Silicon Valley. Correct. Of course, we have Waterloo, and there's lots of stuff going on there. And obviously, you've had success in the labs, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, technology is very important. The biggest problem is always in scale-ups, and you have to do it carefully. You don't want to jump too many steps. We've been doing it over 5 years. It's not like we just came up with an idea and the next thing we are trying to put a mine into production or a process into production.
Right.
We actually went step by step until we got comfortable with what we are doing.
Okay, Kirill Muggerman, CEO of Geomega Resources, ticker GMA.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.